So it says 2E. The heartbeat is initiated by a group of specialized cells in the right atrium called the sinoatrial node or the SA node. The sinoatrial node acts as the pacemaker by sending out an electrical signal spontaneously that stimulates contraction as it propagates through the walls of the atria. Do you know what propagates means? Do you know what that term means? It means to propagate. Pardon?
Spread.
To spread, you bet. Okay, so the impulse of the SA node, so the SA node is located here in the top right atrium, and when that little piece of neural tissue depolarizes, the wave moves through or propagates through the top part of the heart. Okay, so the top part of your heart actually the contraction starts in the top right, and your heart squeezes from right to left in addition to down, like such. It's cool. It's a very gentle little squeeze. So that's the SA node, and it's in the top right corner. I should label that for you. So this is the sinoatrial node, and that sits in the top right atrium of your heart. And spontaneously depolarizes about once every second and causes heart contraction. All right, so then you have a second piece of neural tissue called the AV node. So this is still question 2E. And this would be the AV node, which stands for atrial ventricular node. But nobody says that. Atrial ventricular node. Okay, and so where this sits, so if you have the heart like such, here's a heart, which I still don't know why we draw hearts like this, because the heart isn't shaped like that at all. But people draw it anyway. So what happens here is you have the SA node here in the top right, like this, SA node. And when the SA node depolarizes, it sends out a wave, a nerve impulse that moves or propagates through your heart like such. Okay, so your heart actually on top contracts from right to left and then down. So the top of your heart kind of squeezes this side and then it squeezes like that. It actually squeezes that way. So it starts in the top right and then flows over, which you should have seen when you watched the video that we posted on our Facebook group, right? Yep, cool. If you haven't watched that video, hey, if I could have some ink, that'd be great. There we go. So there's now a second piece of neural tissue, which sits right in the corner where the atria and the ventricles join. Okay, and this piece of neural tissue is called the AV node. Okay, for the atrial ventricular node. And what happens is the AV node receives the impulse from the SA node. So SA is first. The SA node sends out the impulse. The impulse propagates across the top half of the heart until the impulse gets to the AV node. And the AV node then passes the impulse on to the bundle of his. And you said, what? And it's called the bundle of his. And you say, his what? This is a person's name. Okay. So the impulse starts in the SA node, goes across the heart, hits the AV node. The AV node then passes this impulse on to a little bundle of nerves that goes right down the center of your heart, called the bundle of his. And think of this like the bundle of Manro, okay? That this is someone's name. And so what this is, let me draw a little diagram here. So here's your heart. Da, da, da. So here's SA node. Here's AV node, right? And now the bundle of his is this chain of nerves that leads right down the center of the heart. So this is the bundle, should put an L in there, bundle of his. Cool. And all this is this is a collection of nerves that run down the center of the heart. So, did you ever play the game of telephone in elementary school, but instead of talking to each other, you held hands, and then one person would squeeze their hand, and then you squeeze the other hand, and then that would squeeze the next person, and that pulse would go person to person? Did you ever play this game in elementary school? It's just me. Did you ever do this?
Not really.
Not really? Okay. Hey, there's this game you can play with elementary school children where everybody holds hands. And then you squeeze the hand next to you, and then that causes the person to squeeze the hand. And so the hand squeeze goes person to person. And if we were in class, seriously, right now, we'd all hold hands and we do it. And it's super fun because it's silly. But it gets the idea that all this is it's a game of electrical telephone, that the impulse goes from the SA node to the AV node to the bundle of his. And now this impulse goes one more jump, sends the impulse to some fibers that were discovered by a scientist called Purkinje, not kidding, Purkinje, 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 okay? And since they discovered these fibers, we call them Purkinje fibers, okay? So it's SA node to AV node to bundle of his to Purkinje fibers.
Mr. Manuel,
Yes.
can you like briefly tie like all of it together, like from like topic like 1A to like this now?
1A?
Well, like basically like just like a complete like how it all plays together.
Totally. Which is exactly what this diagram, this is where we're headed. I shouldn't let the camera show you. This is where we're headed. So here's the SA node. Here's the AV node. Here's the bundle of his. Here's the Purkinje fibers. And so here's the contraction of your atria. Here's the contraction of your ventricles. And so this is what makes your heartbeat go boom, 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 like this, boom, boom. And so here are your atria. Here are your ventricles, and the contraction of those chambers is all controlled by four things: your SA node, your AV node, your bundle of his, and your Purkinje fibers. And all of this is tracked by what's called an electrocardiogram, which is called an EKG or an ECG. You ever heard of an EKG?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sports medicine.
Yep. Or you have someone in the hospital, and next to them is a little thing that's going like this, and it goes beep, beep, beep. Have you heard that beeping in a hospital?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the electrocardiogram or ECG, EKG. We'll talk about the difference in just one second. And then when each time their heart contracts, it sends out an impulse, and you can track that impulse. But when the heart stops contracting and you're not tracking that impulse, then the alarm goes off, and what do you hear?
A flat line.
Yep. Beep. Thus, they call this flatlining. Yep. It's actually a pretty good movie from the 1990s too, but I'm dating myself. Yep. So, Ms. Diaz, what you asked?
Mr. Manuel,
Yes.
what does the third image show? The third heart?
The third part. Are you talking about here?
No, on the drawing of the hearts.
On the drawing?
The third one.
The third one. This is the impulse reaching the bottom of the heart, because the bottom chambers of the heart all contract all at once. The top half of the heart is kind of a squeeze, right? And it starts in the corner and works its way down. So it's a squeeze like such. But the bottom half of the heart contracts all at once. So it's squeeze and then all at once, and then squeeze and then all at once.
Okay.
Okay. All right, so we have one more structure, and then we can tie this all together, I promise. So, Purkinje fibers. So let's spell them properly first. Purkinje. These are Purkinje fibers. And where these are in the heart, so we go like this, and we go like that, go like this, go like that. So, SA node, AV node, bundle of his, and then the Purkinje fibers come off of the bundle of his. And they go like this. And these are Purkinje fibers, Purkinje-fibers. Those are Purkinje fibers. So this is the bundle of his, and then off of the bundle of his are the Purkinje fibers. And what these do is these spread all throughout the bottom half of the heart. Another word for spread is radiate. They radiate throughout the base of the heart. And cause the ventricles to contract all at once. It's one big contraction. That's important. So then do me a favor in your notes so that I don't forget. I need to talk about the medulla. Do not let me forget to talk about the medulla oblongata, one of my favorite words in science. Okay, this is for CO2 regulation. But what sometimes happens with me is I want to add this to the bottom of the notes, but I need to go talk about a diagram. And so what will happen is I'll go talk about this diagram and I'll forget to go back and talk about the medulla. So don't let me forget. Deal?
Deal.
Deal. All right, so let's tie this all together because you've got a lot of content coming at you. Mammalian heart. This isn't just in humans. This is in all mammals: dolphins, whales, horses, dogs, rats, cats. That rhymed. All mammalian hearts have the same structure. Now, a whale heart is about the size of a basketball or a beach ball, right? Whereas a rat's heart is about the size, the last digit on your finger, and even that's a big rat. Okay, so but structurally they're all identical. Okay, so let's label this and be sure that you understand what all of these things are. So what is this red dot here in the top right atrium? What is that?
SA node.
That's the SA node. Okay, so when you do this, let's label it in all, let's label this in all four of them. All I want to do is that. Thank you. So I need SA node, SA node, SA node, and SA node. So this is the SA node, SA node, SA node, and SA node. Boom, there's your SA node. Okay, so what does the SA node do about once a second?
An impulse.
It sends an impulse. It spontaneously depolarizes. Now, when it sends that impulse, we can then use an electrode to detect that. It's called an electromagnetic disturbance, all right? So when that impulse comes out, you can put electrodes on the chest. They usually do 5 around the pectoral muscle here, and then they'll do 2 more on the sides, and so it surrounds your heart with all of these electrodes that are sensitive to nerve impulses. So as soon as that impulse comes out of the SA node, right, that's what this hump in the EKG is, okay? So this is, I should write this in thick. It's called an electrocardiogram. So we call this an EKG. And you go, well, hold it, Manro. In English, cardio is spelled with a C, right? So why do you think we call it EKG? Any idea? Comes from the company that produced the first machine that tracked this. It was made in Germany. And guess how Germans spell cardio?
Okay.
With a K. Okay. So printed on the machine, right, was EKG. And so people would say, hey, what kind of machine is that? And so what would people say? Well, that's the EKG machine. All right. So you will hear people call this still to this day an EKG, or you'll hear some people say ECG for the English version, but these two are the same thing. It stands for electrocardiogram. It's a graph that presents the electrical activity of the heart. That's what this is. This is a graph of the electrical activity of the heart. Graph of the electrical activity in the heart. So when the SA node depolarizes and the SA node sends out an impulse, that's what this first hump is here. This is the SA node's impulse going out, okay? Well, now you see how that impulse slowly propagates. It's really not very fast. It slowly propagates across the surface of the atria. So the top half of the heart contracts right to left and squeezes. However, once that impulse hits this little piece of tissue, what's that piece of tissue? That's the AV node, okay? So let's circle that, and let's go AV node, and then let's circle it again. AV node, circle it again. AV node, and the last time, boom, AV node. So once the impulse reaches the AV node, now there's nothing casual about this at all. Now this neural tissue transfers the impulse to this neural tissue, which transfers the impulse to this neural tissue at 200 miles an hour. That's how long an impulse goes down. That's how fast an impulse goes along a nerve. Is 200 miles an hour, really fast. Okay, so the impulse then hits the AV node. The impulse goes down this core piece here. What is this core piece here?
Bundle of his.
Bundle of his, excellent. Okay. The impulse then goes through the bundle of his and hits these fibers all around the base of the heart, and those are called
Purkinje fibers.
Purkinje fibers, and the entire bottom half of the heart contracts all at once. Boom. That impulse is much, much stronger, and so that impulse is seen here. That's what that impulse. So this first hump is the impulse out of the SA node, and this second hump is the contraction of the entire bottom half of the heart. This hump at the end, then, this is the repolarization of all of the nerves. So this is the ventricle contraction, and this hump here is atrial contraction. Contraction. So even though in the hospital you just hear beep, it's really hump, hump, hump all at the same time. So you will see that line and it'll go beep, 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 right? And that spike is this. It's the contraction of the ventricles. So then as the heart rate increases, then it goes beep, 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 and that is the electrocardiogram. It is the graph of the electrical activity of the heart. If you don't have any electrical activity of the heart, then the graph is flat. That's why they call it flatlining. There is then an alarm system programmed into the EKG machine that when the person doesn't have an impulse for 2 to 3 seconds, an alarm goes off. They use the same speaker that they use for the beep, and so you just hear beep, and then they're code blue, and then here we go, and they get the defibrillator, and they put the defibrillator right above the heart, right on the side, clear. Bzz, they zap the SA node with electricity, and then do some high-tech science. They wait because it depolarizes spontaneously. Okay, if that doesn't work, you increase the capacitor, lube it up so that you don't burn the skin, bzz, and you zap them again. Okay, you will keep doing this work for, 4, 5, 6, no more than 10 minutes. After 10 minutes, the oxygen deprivation from the brain starts to contribute to cell death in the brain. You start having brain damage. And if you restart the heart, you just revived the person, but they are not the same mentally as they were before the medical event. Now, some people decide when they go into the hospital to not be resuscitated. It's called a DNR. It's a formal document that you have to sign, and then you will wear a bracelet that says DNR. And that's common in terminally ill patients, where they decide, look, if I'm alive, I'm alive, but if my heart stops, please don't try to resuscitate me. It's called the DNR. So from there, we need to go back to the medulla, because the SA node controls heartbeat. Okay? Does the SA node control heart rate?
No.
No. Okay? That is just super, super duper important. Okay? SA node controls heartbeat, but your brain actually controls heart rate. Okay, so let's draw your brain. So draw your brain. Your brain from the side looks something like that. Would you agree?
Yes.
I almost wrote Bryant. That was really close. That's brain. Okay, then your spinal cord comes out the base of your brain like such. Boom. Okay. So right at the base of your brain, where the spinal cord fits into the bottom of your brain, that's called the brain stem. And in the right where the spinal cord hits the base of the brain is the medulla oblongata. It is a portion of your lower brain stem. It's right back here. Okay, it's right where your brain sits on top of your spinal cord. Okay, so this is a portion of the brain stem. And what the medulla does is it monitors the amount of carbon dioxide in your blood. So when you exercise, your muscles go through contractions. They consume ATP, and that means that your muscles need more ATP, which means your muscles then start going through which metabolic process? Since they need ATP.
Cellular respiration.
Excellent. Cellular respiration. Cellular respiration then produces which gas as a byproduct? Carbon dioxide, yes? Okay. So when you exercise, that releases CO2, all right? CO2 goes into your blood. The CO2 mixes with the water and makes carbonic acid. This is the same acid that forms when CO2 diffuses into the ocean for ocean acidification, yes? The chemistry is the same, all right? So CO2 goes into the blood, forms carbonic acid. Therefore, what happens to the pH of your blood?
It goes down.
It goes down, it decreases, okay? That change in pH is detected by the base of your brain, the medulla. The medulla monitors the pH of your blood, right? The medulla then sends an impulse to the heart, not to tell the heart to contract. What does the medulla tell the heart to do? changes heart, heartbeat,
Beat.
heart, not heartbeat, heart
Rate.
rate. There we go. Whew, you made me work for that. Okay, I cannot stress this enough. IB loves to ask this question. And sometimes when the adrenaline is flowing during the exam, you guys miss what is really an easy question. SA node handles heart what?
Beat.
Heartbeat. While the medulla oblongata handles heart
Rate.
rate. Okay, so your heart increases or decreases its rate based on the pH of your blood. The pH of your blood changes based on the carbon dioxide concentration. The carbon dioxide concentration is a result of the process of cellular respiration, which increases when you exercise. This part of the brain also controls your diaphragm and causes you to breathe faster too, but we'll talk about that in a couple of sections when we talk about your lungs. So you now know what causes your heart to contract, and you know about defibrillators, you know about EKGs, and you know about the medulla. And that should take care of 2E. And actually, this was also 2F, which we will then wrap up on Tuesday. Cool. So don't forget about your IB alumni by 3 o'clock this afternoon. Please take a swing at that exam.